Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's Fantasy Fiends podcast. I know I have tons of news for you guys, but before that, I'm Stevie Collier, and I'm here with my co-host Andy Peliquin. And today we are honored to have our guest Rhett Bruno, as well as Jaime Castle or Steve Bolo. How do you say that in English?
Close enough.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Every time.
And actually, I just learned that they're like superheroes. They have like these other lives that we didn't know about. Rhett is an architect and Steve is an ex-metal singer. So it's like a really weird friendship between the two. Rhett, so my question is, why did you stop being an architect?
Well, yeah, I was an architect as of like 4 months ago. I quit to do this stuff. Honestly, I was always into art in school, but I knew that I didn't want to go into art as a profession only. And my mom was kind of like, why not architecture? So I was like, yeah, let's try it. So I applied to architecture schools and got in.
Hey,
and
tell them about when you threw the chair through the window on the day that you quit.
Oh, that story?
Yeah. Tell them that story.
No, I actually quit pretty fine. My bosses were cool with it. They understood. But one of my professors at school did throw a chair at a student once.
Oh, why?
Architecture professors are nuts. They're all non-practicing architects.
Crazy!
For the most part. So they're like pretty intense artsy guys and ladies. And yeah, one just got mad and threw a chair.
That's a pretty bold, blanket statement, man. Architecture professors are nuts. Like, you're going to have architecture professors all around the country.
I didn't say nuts. I
said
they're really into the art of architecture.
I was going to say, all of the architecture professors that watch this podcast are just up in arms. Hate mail just by the drove piling in.
Oh, man.
And so, Steve, now I'm sure the audience is wondering you were a metal guy.
Yeah, man. I guess I still am, if you want to put it that way. I just don't. I don't sing, perform.
So
I was
still
a singer.
listen to music.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, August Burns Red. Those guys are some of my favorite friends of mine, and but it was 10 years ago when we stopped. But we toured for about 3 or 4 years. I was a singer-songwriter, guitarist, but I only sang live. I wrote most of the music, or a lot of the music, and we had 2 guitar players that were phenomenal guitar players. But I got to sing and jump down into the pit and throw elbows and climb on crap and go home bloody, and that was the fun of it all. So it's good stuff.
It sounds so, because now you're a pastor, right?
Yep, I was actually a pastor at the time. I was touring throughout and then rushing home. Oh, really? Yeah. I would just have to be home every Sunday morning. So
I didn't know that was allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know my being from Catholic school, metal was just not even allowed to be discussed. But that's probably why I fell in love with metal music.
Yeah.
When I'm told not to do something, but
Stevie, the rebellious one.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm so rebellious because I listen to metal music. But Disturbed, man, you said you played with Disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably in 6th grade. Yeah. Yeah, just like a bunch of 6th graders walking around making that noise. I feel so sorry for the nuns. It sounded like we're just a little bunch of demons.
El Diablo.
I know, exactly. And also System of a Down.
Yep. Serge Tankian.
Yep. Yeah. So those guys, I think, were becoming popular when I was in 6th grade. But this is not the metal podcast. I just had to say, had to bring this to attention that we have a metal guy and we had an architect guy who are now partners in crime, writing fantasy and making people happy at home.
You can just call him an architect, right? He's
what did I say?
An architect guy.
Ooh, I like that better. It's like a title.
No, I'm an architect guy.
Yeah, Andy, an architect guy. He likes buildings.
Don't encourage him,
I'm retired, actually.
Do not encourage me.
Oh, you get to say do I get to say I'm a retired musician?
No.
Retired is such a great word. It makes you feel like you've achieved something.
Because you still play music for fun. I would never do architecture for fun.
Well, you're going to build a house for me someday, right? You're going to design a house for me someday?
No, probably not. I'll outsource it.
You could
It'll go to India.
I know this. So at the beginning of every podcast, we talk about something cool, and sometimes we skip it, but I can't skip it today because I have some really exciting news. Andy, and also Rhett, Steve, I know you guys have good news because I just saw it the other day on Facebook, and it has something to do with Audible. Yeah, y'all were a bestseller on Audible just recently.
We were the #1 book in the world last week.
Exactly. Yeah.
one day.
So that is some.
That
Dude,
is some,
one day.
some next level awesome right there.
It's cool. Yeah. I mean, it was, I told my grandfather, grandfather's 80 something. I don't know. And I told my grandfather, he goes, what does #1 mean?
That's what my mom said. And I was like, it means we sold 1 million copies, Mom. 1 million.
Does it really mean you sold 1 million copies?
No. What did we sell? Probably, I don't know. Are we allowed to discuss what we sold?
It's like a few thousand when you get a daily deal like that.
It was about 10,000.
That is
Nice
awesome, guys. Congratulations.
8,000. It was good. I mean, it was fun.
Those are great promotions.
Yeah,
it had nothing to do with us, so like we could brag. We got on a promo that
exactly.
They just contacted you guys.
We backed up into it.
They just emailed us and said you guys have the daily deal of the day. It's cool because like one of our other authors for Athon, Haley Stone, had Make Me No Grave as the daily deal like 3 days before that.
But no one told us about that one.
We had no idea. So Rhett and I woke up on a Sunday morning and Audible's daily deal was Make Me No Grave. And we're like, crap, Make Me No Grave is the daily deal. And I think one of us said, it was probably Rhett because he's a jerk, but one of us said, man, well, why don't we get a daily deal? And then like an hour later, we got a text that ours was coming out on Thursday as a daily deal. So
they were probably going in alphabetical order, Athon.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Wow. Well, guys, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. My news it's something similar. It's definitely from a starting point of view though, and I'm signing with Podium.
Hey!
So
Nice.
I am so excited. That was my main goal while writing the series. So
Which one?
Definitely
the Jigsaw Blade?
The Bizarre Blades.
Cool Blade one?
Yeah, the Jigsaw Blade.
That's actually super exciting to me because I won't read any books unless they're on audio. I don't have time, and so like I'm super excited to be able to read that book.
Thanks,
so
man.
It's awesome.
It is I love the reception that has come from the Jigsaw Blade. Even the negative reception is hilarious to me. I mean, at first it breaks my heart, and then when you read it again, it's funny. Just because the book is so insane. And so Victoria, who is the person at Audible who contacted me, she asked me a little bit about it. I was like, do you really want to know? And she was like, you keep using the word unique. And I said, yeah, a lot of authors say their work is unique. And I just want to say mine is just weird. It's just really weird. And she goes, weird sounds negative. And I was like, well, weird in my case is positive. People usually like my weirdness. And if they don't, they leave me 2 stars. So,
I forgot that she's British.
Yeah. And she's in Boston right now.
Yeah, I know. I've met her. I just totally forgot that she had her.
Your opening door just creeped me out.
It creeped me out too. It was my dog.
Did Raven just nose in?
Yeah, she's down there.
Oh, hi,
but it was
Raven.
like a ghost came in on my screen.
Yes.
Stevie, I see Bloody Rose and Kings of the Wild back there. And
Dude,
please tell me you've read them, right?
I've read halfway through Bloody Rose, but then I got stuck on Age of Assassins.
Okay.
So,
such good books.
Yes,
Hi,
they're
Elise.
excellent.
Do you need me to get there?
Hey
No, she
there.
can hang out here.
Oh, she can't hear me because I'm in.
No, you're in headphones. Steve says hi.
Hi, Steve.
So that's my good news.
Great news, man.
Andy,
That's awesome.
Thank you.
That's
I really
cool.
appreciate
Didn't
that.
you have a little something you wanted to show us?
Oh, I do. Probably my favorite book in the world is on print now.
Hey!
Oh, nice.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's so cool, man. That looks great.
Yeah,
Good job.
it's so great. And the dedications is 2 pages long. I felt bad. I wanted to put something funny on there, like, I'm so sorry for this long dedication.
What'd you write for me, Stevie?
I put, to Andy Peliquin, thank you so much for being by my side every step of the way. Without you, this series wouldn't have reached the success that it has. Again, thank you so much for believing in me.
I was hoping you'd say something like with like you're my North Star, but that's pretty good too.
It was
You
pretty
are my
mushy.
moon and
It was pretty
stars.
mushy.
Yeah,
Hey, that's a nice thick looking book, man. What is that? About 110,000 words?
dude, you hit it right.
Yeah, man,
110,000 words. That's exactly what it is.
I've gotten
actually.
good at eyeballing
Was that really just an eyeball?
Yeah, man. I
thought
see him. I see him all day long.
You should do something else. We should retire.
like one of those carnival people, but you do it at like author conferences, you know?
Man.
Book, all right. You know, guess how many pages this book has. I'm gonna try.
That was the worst thing I've ever seen.
I remember in school they would have the bubble gum jars, and you had to guess how much bubble gum was in there.
Yeah.
And at our school, if you guessed it, you didn't get a whipping by the nun. So that was great. No, but
You got a sad upbringing, man. I feel so bad.
Catholic schools are hard. Catholic schools are really hard. Actually, in my dedications, I thank the teacher that whenever they sent me to the priest 3 times because of my writing, I thank the teacher who took me aside and said, "Hey, keep going. You have a talent, but don't tell anyone I told you this," because she would have gotten in trouble too. So,
I feel like if we were all in a tavern, like showing off like war story scars and stuff, I'd be like, I got this scar from an axe in the middle of the battlefield. And you'd be like, a nun hit me right here. And it's
With-
a scar.
there was a wooden ruler.
But you know, the funny thing is that he's about to write a series all about whips and stuff.
Nice.
So
I
it's
am.
like something stuck.
Well, they already
something
did
just-
that. It was called 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, we
Yeah.
spent like 10 minutes last time making jokes like that too.
And now, like throughout the series, there will be a lot of BDSM jokes.
It has to be, I'm
it's
sure.
gonna be, yeah, definitely. But yeah, that's enough about me. Andy, what about you?
Well, you know, it's been another week of slogging at the work in progress. I hit 266 freaking thousand words today.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I hope to finish by tomorrow, if not Saturday morning. It's probably going to end up being like 275,000 words. It just keeps getting bigger, but it's an awesome story. So I think it's gonna push the limits of what Amazon's gonna allow me to publish in paperback. So I might have to actually split it up into 2 volumes because it's just such a monster.
Wow.
I can tell you something, Mr. Andy.
That's the
Pelican.
max.
This is actually your max. This is 1,200 pages.
Okay.
This is
3 books.
roughly I could tell you the word count if you give me a second. Close to 500,000 words or so.
Okay. And that's through Amazon?
That one is actually it's a hardcover, so that's through Ingram.
Yeah.
This is 180,000, and we have the. Oh, you know what? Hold up. This, sir.
Okay.
This is 225,000 words. This is Commune by Josh Gayu, and it maxes out at let's see, we have 767 words. You're allowed to do 899 through Amazon, so you will be able to do it with what'd you say, 270,000?
Yeah.
You should be you will max it out. You will get like right there.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So like when we did the Ragged Heroes anthology last year, I think it was like 240,000, and I had to tweak the font sizes and eliminate a lot of like blank pages and stuff because it was just right at the edge. So I'm if I can't figure out how to do it, I will have to do a volume 1, volume 2 because it's not one of those books you can split up. Literally the second chapter introduces something that pays off at the end of the whole book. It's one of those things, the circle opens and the circle closes. So I can't actually split it up into 2 separate books, book 3 and 4. It's got to be book 3, maybe volume 1 and 2.
So I think your worst case would be just dropping it down to like 9-point font and killing the line spacing a little bit. And you probably would make it.
But it's just way too hard on my eyes, on people's eyes. I don't know if it'd be worth it.
I mean, all 7 of those people that still buy paperbacks will have to like get new glasses.
Yeah, we all do it just for our own vanity's sake, huh? Just put it on our bookshelf, another trophy.
Well,
that's what I do it for. I love it.
Because my books are all in the same world, it appeals to people who are collectors. Like they want to collect all of the books. So
for sure.
I wouldn't say 10% of the sales that I get are paperback, but there is a decent number of people who buy the paperbacks because, they're like, oh, I don't like Kindle or I don't want audiobook or whatever. So,
yeah, I was just being facetious. There's some people that still read them.
I love that word, facetious. I actually do the
sounds
paperback.
like feces.
That's probably why. Yeah. And now I'm showing my age, 12.
Steve, is that orange Gatorade?
This is whiskey and ginger ale.
Oh.
That's a great drink.
I mean, don't you know what I drank by now?
Come on.
Trying to look cool with your glass over there.
Oh, is that orange? Oh, okay, you were kidding. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I ruined your joke. Let's go back and do it over again.
That's okay. You need a real ice cube.
Let's see. Okay, so today we are talking about something I'm going to let Andy discuss. Andy, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking architecture, and this is something that gets glossed over a lot in fantasy. It's something I had to research quite thoroughly for my Queen of Thieves series. Like, I was reading this book by a former cat burglar, not someone who steals cats, a burglar, and he was talking about architecture, both modern architecture and then medieval and ancient. How it adapted according to the thieves, and thieves adapted according to the architecture. And actually, burglary wasn't all that common before. It's actually only a fairly recent crime in the last few hundred years since the industrial era. Before, most of the crime took place in highway robbery. That was the most common, or bandits and stuff like that. There wasn't a whole lot of pickpockets and thief guilds and stuff like that. That's sort of a fantasy thing that originated with Charles Dickens, that notion. But there wasn't a whole lot of thieving before, but it would have been so easy because every single building in medieval time, especially the nobility's buildings, they had entrances for the servants. There were the back ways that they, would enable them to take out the garbage, or to, dump the slop buckets, the chamber pots into a special place, where there was the barrels that the gong firmers would come and take away. And this is the kind of stuff that you don't really think about until you need to. So it's really interesting to dive into the architecture of buildings at the time and think about it beyond just the, the beautiful castle. Like, you actually have to think about, could this exist? Would this exist in the culture of the time? And then how to exploit it, at least in the Thief series and Assassins, because that's the kind of stuff I write. When you guys were crafting, the dungeon scene is one that sticks in my memory from Web of Eyes. Was it just kind of like the classic dungeon that you went with, bars and dripping water and stone and slime and stuff like that, or did you actually think a bit more about it?
Which dungeon?
He's talking about the one with Reese.
Yeah,
with Reese. Okay.
You want to take it?
I think we both just pictured the normal, bars dripping dungeon. I think, I was picturing kind of the Aladdin dungeon too, when Jafar is pretending to be an old man.
I think we both had that scene because of Reese. That scene was etched into our mind of Jafar as the old man. But in Web of Eyes, there's this there's sort of a running joke throughout the Buried Goddess saga that Whitney keeps getting imprisoned. He's supposed to be kind of the world's greatest thief, but he just keeps getting imprisoned, and it happens.
Usually not his fault.
It's never his fault. He is a good thief, but he just, and so because of that, I know there's at least 2 dungeons. There's 3 different dungeons that Whitney is in just that first book. And so I know that as I was going through, I was going, okay, how do these dungeons look different? One of them is in an old dwarven fortress that would have been built ages and ages ago. And then, you have the one in Yarrington that you're talking about with Reese. But then you have the cat dungeon as well. So there was a little bit of thought, but Rhett's usually the one that does all the weird architecture stuff that I go, is this a real thing?
I think we actually did think about it in that book more than any other, just because he did get captured a lot.
Yeah.
And it started to feel the same. So then all of a sudden, instead of it just being like an underground cavern lair when he gets taken by cultists, we were like, well, what if this is a cool ancient dwarven ruin? So instead of being in a normal dungeon, the entry to the dwarven ruin is a giant dwarf's face and the window is its eye and stuff like that. So just ways to make them feel a little bit different. I mean, we don't go into detail as far as what the bars are made of or anything like that, but just to make them all feel like different places. So I think that's something I try to do as I'm writing. I don't like to describe the setting too much, but just describing the spaces a little bit is probably something that helped. I probably learned just learning about spaces in college.
Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever knowingly written something that wasn't architecturally realistic for the sake of cool? Like, you know, like fantasy castles, you know, they're going to have these 300 feet towers and, you know, stuff that given the building materials and technology of the time wouldn't have necessarily been able to exist. Have you done that in your books, or are you sort of grounded enough that you can't?
No, for sure. When it's fantasy, like there's always castles protruding up over places, and like I went to school. I know how far you could cantilever a building, and it's not very far in real life, unless you're built. And even back then, like you'd have to build humongous supports and stuff. I mean, we have bridges going over huge ravines, and even that kind
but they're Glorium and reinforced.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's got these floating bridges, you know, whether it's like the ancient elves, you know, the equivalent, the ancient technology, civilization that built these super amazing things. It's kind of what we do.
Yeah, and I mean, Romans built pretty crazy stuff, but usually their bridges were supported all the way down to the ground. And, you know, in most fantasy, even in covers you see, it's just like a modern bridge spanning a huge gap, and stone probably couldn't do that.
Yes. Do you ever think about how your culture would shape your buildings, like beyond the fact that, you know, I've kind of got this image in my head of London or France or Venice in the 16th century, so all the buildings are going to kind of look like this. Do you ever like dig a bit deeper and say, okay, this city is built around this river, so the nobility's houses would be built with closer access to the river to dump their waste, or, you know, things like that?
I mean, I think we've organized all of our cities pretty well when it comes to that. I mean, some are more Eastern, some are Western. We have like some more Middle Eastern cities too. I think I definitely focus a lot on structuring a civilization in my Titanborn series, but that's more futuristic type stuff. But in the fantasy, I think we usually take a real culture and then try to spin it off of that a little bit.
Nice.
We have go ahead. No, we have you know, like Windport. I remember in book 2, Windport was we kind of described it as the hodgepodge of everything. It was,
but also like Venice.
Yeah. It started. Yeah. It started out as a kind of a pirates, a Tartuga kind of a place, and then built up around that because it's in a cove, yada yada yada, and it became the really the trade capital of our world. So it's got canal systems and all of this with gondolas and all of this other stuff, but like there's also the Pempigese ghetto that's there. And so like everything, and there's this elaborate sewer system that's just disgusting and gross, and it empties out into the bay. And even at one point, I do remember, I think Rhett wrote it, that like that this particular house wouldn't be close to where the sewers dumped out because it was, you know, among the richer of the folk in there. So I think subconsciously, because Rhett is an architect, I think a lot of that stuff comes through, and I don't even know if he really notices it.
Yeah, I mean, we took a lot of civil architecture type classes and city layout type things. Yeah. I mean, in that book especially, most of our books, the adventure kind of takes it to a bunch of different places, but that book is probably half the book, maybe even more, is set in that one wild city. So we went pretty in depth with that one for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting how the architecture and the city layout or the planning kind of goes hand in hand. This city that I just built for this book, it's built sort of around this massive tower, architecturally impossible tower, which I make sure to clarify in the book. You know, the technology they had at the day wouldn't work, but it's basically a massive source of light. And so all of the buildings around it, they've got like glass walls to let in as much light as possible from that thing, all from, you know, the faces of their house that, you know, that encircle the thing. And it was something that I'd never thought about until I sat down to write it. You know, it's like, okay, I've got the city. They're walking through the streets. There's this light source up ahead. Obviously, you know, they're going to take advantage of it so they don't have to, you know, burn lamps and waste money on that. So then now, you know, a source of, or a mark of affluence is the closer to this thing, the ice spire, they call it, the closer to that you are, the richer you are. And then, you know, one guy's got a house with the whole wall, floor to ceiling, 3 stories, is super costly crystal or glass or whatever. And so, you know, it's just like these things sort of shape the culture just as much as, you know, the architecture is shaped by it as well.
Yeah. Rhett did a dwarven fortress just in this new book that we're working on right now. And I think one of the most fun parts about co-authoring this book has been a very unique because the first 4 that we've written together in the Buried Goddess saga, I think we wrote them a lot closer to one another. Very, very much like, what are you doing? What are you doing? How is this going to play out? But this new book, book 5, I think we both just been writing together for so long. We're just like, just do your thing, I'll do my thing, and we'll figure out what happens when it comes together.
Yeah.
And so I took over. The way that we write is handing back and forth after we've done significant writing on a particular point of view. And he threw me the Torsten character who happens to go to the Dwarven Fortress. Some of this is it makes my jealousy just go through the roof because he gets to do some things that I wanted to do, but like he did such a good job that I don't care. And he did this whole like elaborate mine cart system in the mountains with the dwarf and everything, and then he had this stalactite deal that hung down from the ceiling that was like carved into the face of a dwarf with like waterfalls coming off the beard, and like the cart system goes through the mouth into like this giant cavern where the king lives. And I'm like, how did this happen?
Yeah,
how does the cart get back up from the bottom to the top?
He even described. He even said in there it used like gravity to like propel it and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm just gonna suspension of disbelief. Starts now.
Well, they're
but it was great. It was a lot of fun.
I was picturing I don't know, the first dwarven city in World of Warcraft, like the original version. I think it was Ironforge or something. I can't even remember what it was called.
Ironforge.
Yeah, it was.
But I mean, it worked,
Ironforge,
and it was such a cool visual that like I didn't care about. Like, if you want to really pick it apart, then like let's pick apart the fact that we have like, I don't know, dragon pigs in our book. Like, if we're gonna pick apart that, it's like people giving crap about Endgame. It's like you've got crap about time travel, but there's a giant purple dude with a nutsack on his chin, and you're fine with that part. But like, what?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You know, like probably one of the classic examples would be Indiana Jones. You know, the arrows shooting from the wall or whatever they were in the stone trap. How do they reload that for the next time? You know, it's something no
That's
one
a one-time trap.
Yeah, exactly. But then what if someone comes back to steal it again? Or, you know, the trap it springs, the guy dies. They retrieve the golden thing, put it back. All right, now we've got to roll this boulder all the way back up the hill and, you know, reload the spring traps and things like that. It's something that most of us never think about because it's only something we have to use once. You know, it's this cool thing that makes it harder for a character to get, you know, past the trap or, you know, show how cool they are and clever and cunning because they figure out some trap. But you never think about what it actually means.
What about in Indiana Jones? Isn't there a skeleton with arrows sticking out of him? Like after, like where he realized, wasn't that Indiana Jones where he realized that what the trap was because he saw a skeleton with arrows in it? Was that not Indiana Jones?
It might be. I don't.
So it had been reloaded once.
And just imagine the guy reloading that. All right, you know, shoving the arrow in, shit hits him.
It's over.
Yeah, I mean, I think though. The stuff back then, you could write anything so pure. Like, I think that's why shit gets hated on today because there's so many people watching the same stuff, and then they can comment and write about it everywhere. And then if you go back and watch those old movies, like, oh, this came out today, it would probably be one of the worst movies ever made. Yeah. Yet somehow that same movie is a classic that I would watch every day.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Star Wars, right?
Or like,
cool,
anything popular. But yeah, Star Wars.
It's funny. I was just thinking it would be such a hilarious book to write. Stevie, take note of this. The guy who's responsible for reloading all of the traps in a dungeon. You know, just like one of those like low-level goblin creatures. Like I was thinking of Chris Fox's Goblin book, whatever it was. Yeah, it was just like the guy who gets stuck doing that, you know, rolling the boulder back up the ramp and locking it in place, you know, reloading the arrows and the spring hits, you know, shoots the arrow at him, you know, passes out from the poison or something. It would just be such a funny book to write, like one of those dungeon crawl stories.
That is smart. I can't wait to write that. That's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds like a great short story. That'd be a terrible novel.
Well, it would actually, like, it could be really fun because, the guy has to know all of the traps in the place. So even if he's a little, tiny goblin facing off even against some demon or something,
Yeah.
he knows all the secrets of the place, so he can go tripping all of them, or go running throughout. It could be kind of a cool.
Well, the plot has to be that somebody actually gets a hold of this dude who needs to steal the thing further into the dungeon and uses him because he knows about all of the traps to begin with. He's got to be the one that actually
He's like
steals
the
it.
partner in crime.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it. The Fantasy Fiends writes Little Guy in Dungeon.
Goblin Trapper.
Dungeon Trapper Part 1.
That's pretty cool. Anyways, we could expound on architecture because it's something that you really do have to understand. For example, not architecture, it's not really architecture, it's more the building. But I had no idea that windows in the medieval times didn't have glass. It's just something you never think about until you spend 10 seconds researching it and you realize, it had like oilcloth covering it, or there were no windows, you saw through, they were just shutters, or the windows open, they were boards. It's just like these things that we take for granted, both from our life and the things that we see in the movies. In every single movie, the medieval castle has nice windows, so they look out through the window and the pastoral scenes, the army charging and stuff like that. None of that would have happened. It's just so funny to think about all of that stuff and to actually learn about it, and then it changes your approach to writing the story and the places that these people go.
I think the beauty is that when you're writing, there's so many options as far as what kind of fantasy you're writing. Like I think about, I read Queen of Thieves, if I have that title right.
Yeah.
And you tend to write very dark fantasy, and
just a little bit.
And the dark fantasy, I think, lends itself to historical accuracy. In order to take a dark fantasy seriously, it has to feel authentic, even in the world that you live in order to really take seriously the plight of the characters that are involved. In something a little more lighthearted, like the Buried Goddess saga, I would be so surprised if there were people going, there can't be a glass castle. And those kind of probably the ones that wouldn't enjoy the series to begin with. I do know that if I went darker, I would have to take into really serious consideration everything that I put in that book. Would it exist in that time period? Because people are going to scrutinize those moments.
Yeah. Or could you explain it away with the hand wavium of,
Right.
whatever your version of magic?
Yeah.
I use alchemy instead of magic in mine. It's more fun that way.
Yeah. Brandon Sanderson is a good example. Like I remember reading, I don't know, one of his 700,000 word books. I don't know.
Yeah.
The ones
Right.
I listen to mostly in my sleep. And I remember there were a lot of things that were just kind of explained away through the magic system. And he did a great job building that magic system. So at no point did I go, this can't work, because he gave it to me and it worked the way he gave it to me.
Yeah. Anything explained well enough is believable, essentially.
So, and that's a way to get rid of the whole author said so thing, is just explain in more detail.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Make it-
As long
make
as it
it work.
works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, enough that they could suspend.
Well, what I do is
disbelief.
I usually foreshadow it. But now I'm thinking, now this is interesting to me, because if I explain it a little bit more, because I was editing today and one of my characters says, oh yes, well, this has the ability to do this. I'm like, well, he never really said that he ever had that. I'm just making that now, so it's useful. So now I have to go back and foreshadow it. But the problem is the scene is a very quick one, so I don't have time to really explain. So maybe if I should, maybe it would be best to foreshadow it or talk about it later.
Something that Rhett and I really strongly believe in is building the world through characters.
Okay.
And so we don't have a ton of exposition that tells you about things. Everything that you experience as a reader, you are experiencing through the eyes of one of our characters. And so we believe in I guess, Rhett, you can correct me if I'm describing this poorly, but like we believe in explanation through repetition. Not overabundantly repetitive, but like we have these pig dragons. They're called Zulong in our books, and like we never really like straight up tell you what they are. The characters just constantly interact with them, and you begin to get an idea of what they are, and you can sort of create you want the reader to create in their mind, I think, what they're seeing more so than what you want them to see.
I like that last part.
It also lets you describe the same thing differently. And I think that's what, even in my own stuff and the fantasy series we do, is a lot of things are described by one character and then totally different by another character, and they're the same. But I think that really helps us make each character feel different, because in real, like, people see stuff differently. And yeah, it's a great way to cut down on info dumping, is like, unless something is super, super relevant in the setting to what that character is doing, just let it exist. Because in reality, if you're from the point of view of that character, they're not going to understand how everything works. Like, I don't know how this window right here is put together. So if I was a character in a book, why would I info dump on how it's put together? I would just say what it looks like and move on, kind of thing, and what it does.
Yeah.
And only what's relevant to the story. Like you know, you describe a tavern. You don't really need to get into tavern unless there's something that really stands out.
Yeah.
Some detail that's important.
I know this is fantasy Fiends, not sci-fi Fiends, but Peter F. Hamilton is really good. Yeah, right. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Peter F. Hamilton, but Peter F. Hamilton writes pretty giant books. One of the things that he's really, really good at is creating technology that he never ever explains to you. You just learn about it through the use of it by the characters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliantly done. Like, he could be describing a cell phone, but he will never tell you what that cell phone is. He'll just show you how it's used. And by the time it's important, you're like, I know exactly what that thing is.
Yeah. That is a very effective way to do it, but then it does give you limit, like the whole thing of The Rules of Magic by Brandon Sanderson. The more you understand the magic, the more you can push its boundaries. So if you've got this thing that is a little bit vague, then you don't know when the character's doing something cool with it, because you don't know where the boundaries are. So I mean, it is a great way to do it. For me, I like using that shock value of here's the limitations. Now, here's what happens when you push it beyond it.
Yeah, and I think that depends on the genre too. Like, that's why it's important not to miss categories, especially in sci-fi. If you're not writing hard science fiction and you put it in hard science fiction, people that go in expecting to hear all the techie details that don't really add to the story, but that's the stuff they like, they're going to be disappointed. Same with magic. Like, our story is more of like a high fantasy adventure, so the magic system is there, but it's not something super detailed. Like, if you read The Name of the Wind, that's a pretty crazy detailed magic system. You have to be into that stuff to read that book.
Right. I mean, we got blood magic. The very simple fact is that it takes blood to create magic.
Yeah.
And, it's either done externally or internally. And all magic is done that way, but like, there's only certain times where you realize that it's blood magic, but in our minds, it's all blood magic. It's just whether it's done internally or externally.
Yeah, for sure. It's an easy way to play with magic without getting into the details. And so, I don't know, at least for me, my books have so many details on so many different things that sometimes it's okay to do a little bit of hand wavium.
Sure.
For sure.
Get away with it. Like, for example, in the Queen of Thieves series, when they're trying to escape from with their loot. There's the city system of underwater, the sewage system, essentially, and it's got underground rivers and stuff. So they just said it's a system of wheels and pulleys that's dragging this barge upriver. That's it. No, you don't need to get into the counterweights and how much pressure and all that. It's just like wheels and pulleys upstream. You kind of, it's real enough that readers can sink their teeth into a wheel and pulley system, and it explains it enough.
I think in regards to Stevie's statement, though, I think it's important that those shock value moments or those all of a sudden moments have some kind of foundation so that the reader doesn't go, what just happened?
Yeah.
Because I think of, and this might be a bad example, but I think of Hunger Games, and I hope that it's been long enough since Hunger Games came out that I'm not spoiling anything for anybody. But when God Almighty, when Prim died in whichever book that was, I don't know, was that book 3? I can't believe I'm admitting on air that I read the Hunger Games series in its completion. But Prim dies, and I remember like 4 or 5 pages later they mentioned her dying, and I went, she died? because there was this really shocking moment, but it was glanced over to a point where I was like, I didn't even know it happens. And I think that can happen in magical moments in fantasy where like something crazy happens because of magic, and there's no precedent for that existing in your world, but then all of a sudden it happens and everything is changed, and the reader might not know why if it's not properly set up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
basically for any of those punches to land, they've got to have the foundation.
Yeah, I mean, unless your intent is for it to be unexplainable. Like, I know we do that a lot in the Buried Goddess saga because we do have our gods intervening, but you never really know they are. So, like, a big fire can start or something, and it's thought to be magic, but someone else is like, "Oh, the gods did that," kind of thing.
Right, but
so,
we take the next like book of ours to like
Explain
have
it,
all
yeah.
of our characters individually trying to figure out what the hell just happened. There's still the moments where like Torsten thinks that it was his god, and Sora knows that it was her, and Whitney doesn't give a crap. But like they all react to it in their way, and it wasn't just like here's the result of it. There's still the moments where you figure out what.
Yeah, the moment is still big.
Yeah. What is Stevie doing? Stevie, you writing a book over there?
No, I'm just listening to what you guys are saying.
Oh, I thought you were right. I thought you
Goblin
finished.
Trapper.
I thought you
No,
finished
no, I
Goblin
would
Trapper
never-
already.
No.
Dang, I thought we were gonna have a book by the end of this podcast.
No, I'm not. When it comes to the architecture in my books, it's really, I don't spend a whole lot of time on it. I've never really done a whole ton of research on it. In my opinion, with my books, the readers aren't looking for that. I really like R.J. Barker's books because there's not a whole lot of setting in it. He is a pantser, so I'm thinking maybe that's because we're both pantsers that we both do that. We don't describe the setting intensely. We just move along with the story. But there have been cases where I've built some pretty cool stuff, in my opinion. So in book 2 of the Golden Blade, there's this huge statue, and I have to make it so this huge statue moves just slightly to let people under it. And I realized the only way to do this was through magic, because I could not figure out a way to use rope pulleys to move such a massive thing. Rhett, would that be possible?
Probably not. Not without
Okay.
an army of slaves.
Well,
Which is how anything humongous was ever built.
Yeah, Archimedes
Throughout all of history.
Archimedes was the one who said, give me a lever big enough and somewhere to place the fulcrum, and I can move the world. So anything can be done with enough applied force, but
Or 7,000 slaves.
exactly.
Yeah.
So Stevie, I know, like, I'm not interviewing you, but I do have a question. Like, so
Yeah.
can you tell me? Can you give me the elevator pitch of Jigsaw Blade?
So the Jigsaw Blade is
It's a blade and a jigsaw.
Yes,
Done.
it's I realized right before I started writing it that the Jigsaw Blade was actually a tool, a modern tool, and I don't know why this didn't come up. It's obvious knowledge, but I refused to give up the idea of using that word. I was just like, I'm not going to let this stop me. I want the book to be called The Jigsaw Blade. And so that was kind of the start of this insane creation that I made. And so The Jigsaw Blade is a simple coming of age story of a young boy who's a painter's apprentice, and he is a dweeb when it comes to, so like I'm a Star Wars fanatic. This guy is the fanatic of champions, who are the owners of these magical blades. And a champion can be either negative or positive. So it can be a really great warrior, or it can be an evil dude that kills millions or thousands of people with his blade. So he is envious of all the champions. He wants his own blade, but he's so weak. He's probably like 5'5", 5'6". He has no muscle. He's pale. He's hated by most everybody because he's like a runt in this kingdom of giant men, because it's a Iceland, really, and you have to be strong to live, and he is not strong. Plus, anyone that's a painter's apprentice is seen as unworthy, unneeded. It's just they're a luxury. So he's already so anyway, it's through destiny that he actually falls upon this blade, which is the weakest blade in the entire world that we think it is. We think it's this garbage blade, and there is this thing called the Featherstone Omen, which is my way of saying that it was his destiny. And the whole book, the whole series is just about all this intense sacrifice that Finn has to go through to come of age to become this amazing champion who we at all odds were stacked against him. So, and he's kind of like he's me in high school. So I was by
Awesome.
far not cool in high school. So, but
Cool.
I mean, if you think playing the Prince and the Frog Prince is cool, then yeah, maybe I was cool. But
Very cool. Awesome.
yeah,
Steven, we're gonna work
I
on
hope
your
that was good enough.
elevator pitches.
That was one long ass elevator ride.
Okay, funny story.
2 sentences.
story.
That's all you get.
I always got to do all the speeches in business school. I did all of them. I always got up and did it. But when it came to the elevator pitch, it was like the big hook coming out and grabbing me because they knew once they got my ass up there, I wasn't coming back. So elevator pitches, not my thing. I've never been good at them. I learned how to do them, but always, I think I probably got in because we got graded on elevator pitches. We actually had to write these things out. And also another thing called a paramedic system when you're trying to write a memo to your boss. I failed that as well because it's supposed to be half a page. And so,
Well, I just figured your elevator ride was the one from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that actually
so I just
through the
burst through
roof.
the roof. Yeah. And which is why I always go to Andy for my blurbs because I'll just always write a 20-page blurb. It's like, well,
Right.
they gotta know this if they want to read the book. They gotta know it. I think I'm hoping a lot of people have that issue because they get so passionate about what they work on and they just want to vomit this all out. Like I wanted to vomit this on you.
I think
Steve.
most people don't know how to write a blurb at all, a description
It's so hard.
at all.
It's very difficult.
Yeah,
Because they
taking
either too much or
workshops,
too
too.
little. Or...
Yeah.
There's
Luckily, I
something you don't
paid for
really
all mine,
need
so.
unless you're going to submit to publishers and stuff, where you actually need to write your elevator pitch, like you said, to give to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I didn't. So it sounds mean. It's not mean. Just take it as it's not mean. I don't care what your book was about. You have a really cool book cover, so I'm gonna read it. Like
Exactly.
that just is.
That's all
That's
it is,
my
right?
world. That is my world.
That's what
It's
I
like,
do. The
it
same thing.
doesn't matter.
Which is fine. That's why having a 1-sentence pitch maybe is good, because you see a cover and 1-sentence pitch, and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah, I was always when I went to the library. That's probably why I snuck over to the adult section to get a Stephen King book. So I saw the Crazy Vampire on the front.
The adult section.
The adult section is what they called it. And,
Behind a curtain.
Yeah. Well, basically, Stephen King's stuff should be behind a curtain, especially for an 8-year-old. But yeah, that's why I got so messed up so early. But yeah, man, that's the story of the Bizarre Blades, and it's to the point now where I feel like I live in that world. Have you ever just been in a series so long you start talking to yourself?
Too much.
Yeah, these characters start becoming too real.
Did you by chance, there's no shame in this, did you by chance come up with that idea during your reading of Kings of the Wild?
Actually, no, it came from an anime called My Hero Academia.
Okay. Because like Kings of the Wild, I think had the coolest idea, like just ever, is this, the bands of adventurers that had groupies. Like, what a cool idea.
It's
like
such a good idea. It is. And
what
he's
the
a
crap?
rock guy, so
It's
and it probably
amazing.
speaks to you really well.
Oh, I was so jealous reading that. I'm like, why didn't I come up with this idea? So
I love how
amazing.
I think it's the half black guy, the black guy. He calls his sword the axe. Or no, he has an axe, and he's the guitar player.
It was such a brilliantly written fantasy novel.
Yeah. No, I stole humor from Kings of the Wild.
That's fair.
When Kings of the Wild came out, I said, why can't I make a funny book? Because I was writing dark fantasy. I was like, why can't I write a book that's funny? And so I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm writing a book that I want to write.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the Bizarre Blade series. And now I forced Andy to read half of it, and he's probably like, oh, God.
It's hilarious nonsense.
It is. It is nonsense. It is nonsense. But, okay, I'll keep going on and on and on. But yeah, there's my elevator pitch that took us 20 minutes to get through.
Sweet.
Yeah. I think it's too late to do the reading, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah.
So we can just continue talking.
Well, why don't you guys give us your elevator pitch for the buried goddess?
Yeah.
Let's see if you do any better than Stevie.
Remind me, I have a funny
bar is
story,
very
though.
low.
Now, are we doing the Buried Goddess saga, or are we doing one book in the Buried Goddess?
That's not fair.
Saga.
The whole saga.
The whole saga.
Well, yeah. Let's see if you can do better.
6 books, almost 1 million words, and we have 20 seconds.
right.
Rhett, rock, paper, scissors.
Sure.
No, really? No, just for real? Okay. All right, rock,
Wait,
paper,
do you do says or just shoot?
says.
Oh god,
What the
it's different.
frickin-
There's regional rock paper scissors is.
rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
No, that's not how it is in the Northeast.
In Japan, where it originated, it's rock, paper, scissors. Like you throw on scissors.
Oh, in the Northeast, it's rock paper scissors says shoot.
Oh my Lord Jesus, come home soon.
it
right.
caused so many issues in college.
Who
All
said
right.
shoot?
So what are we doing?
It's
I don't know.
too late. It's too late, guys. The elevator has crashed and burned.
Yeah, that makes me feel better. They haven't gotten to theirs yet, so I've been
basically-
redeemed.
Here we go. Rhett's got it.
Go,
A
Rhett.
vengeful goddess is ready to return, and it takes a bunch of pretty inept heroes to stop her from returning.
That was
Well
sexy.
done. Well done. Is the goddess is kind of like Lolth, the spider god from
No, the Drizzt series?
yeah.
No, so she's actually not the goddess. She is basically the main villain in book 1. That is Bliss,
Oh, okay.
the Spider Queen, and Bliss is technically the sister of Nasilia, the buried goddess. But the idea is that the buried goddess got buried during the god feud by the main god Iam. And,
Like the Zeus of our pantheon, basically.
yeah, and so there was this giant god feud where, and what's cool is we have all of our cultures. This kind of goes back to architecture in a way. Every culture has a different explanation of what happened in the god feud.
I like that.
So throughout and we never tell you which one is real and which one is true. You just have to compile it
nice.
all. And so Iam curses the Spider Queen Bliss and sends her into the webbed woods. And so that's the foundation of book 1, is that they have to go into the webbed woods for whatever reason. You can read that if you want to, or anybody. But Nasilia is buried under the mountain, and she has been forgotten. And not only has she been forgotten, she's been vilified. And everybody thinks that she is this evil, horrible person. Goddess is really what I should say. And so the entire book is kind of her return. And whether she was evil or not doesn't matter, because now she wants vengeance.
Yeah, now she's just pissed and lonely. And you kind of find out she was the goddess of nature, which is not usually an evil goddess in most things, but she kind of doesn't care anymore. She just wants revenge against everyone who forgot her, the other gods and the people who used to worship her and stuff. So she's kind of in the background of all the books. It's sort of like Thanos in Avengers, where she's not really involved in what's going on physically until towards the end of the series, but has her pawns and all these people trying to resurrect her with magic.
Very cool. Sounds like classic fantasy. It reminded me of the one from the Dragonlance.
I've never read any Dragonlance.
The Dragonlance, it's basically got the good, the bad, and the neutral gods, essentially, like boiling it down to really simple. And so it was just reminded me of that, because the goddess Takesis, I think, it's always a goddess that's bad for some reason.
It's so sad, isn't it? It's so sexist. Horrible people.
Yeah.
I have a real quick funny story. Speaking of architecture, my brother's never read any of my books. He's only listened to the first one of the Dark Assassin series, but he's reading the Jigsaw Blake that's got dinosaurs, and he's studying paleontology. But isn't that sad? No one in my family has.
He's now, his books are used as expert resources for paleontology.
Professor, you have to get this in the library.
That would be cool for it to be in the UT library. But anyway,
Library.
Yes. I had this hut in this. So it's in Iceland, right? With snow and crap. So it's a tundra. And they're surrounded by these mountains. So the city of Sumatai was built around mountains, which is a horrible idea when the mountains are covered in snow. Right, Rhett? So if there's an avalanche, people die.
Sure, I don't think you need to go to architecture school to know that.
Yeah. So these guys are stupid. Well, they built their house on like 5 feet stilts, right? And my brother's reading it, and it's to save them from an avalanche. And my brother's reading, and he comes to me and goes, "You do realize just because the house is 5 feet higher, that the blizzard will kill everybody." And I said, don't, can I keep it? Can I at least keep it, man? Will people not realize that? He goes, "No, you're just retarded. take it out. So
Yeah, it'll just, instead of sweeping through the first floor,
Yeah.
it'll sweep through the foundation of the house.
just break those stilts down.
Yeah, and then the
Now,
house falls.
even if they would have survived being buried by snow, crushed by their house. So
the problem is I spent a lot of time on these freaking stilts, and I was so pissed that I had to take it out. So now the house sits on the snow. Oh, I was so mad that I did. It was good, at least a good 1,000 words that I had to cut out. And to this day, my
Describing the
brother
stilts.
just talks about it, and I
the
don't want
stilts
my
were
brother.
tall with wood grain, the shape of
They
1,000
were
words.
Did they dig into the ground, or were they just stilts right on the ground?
they were just stuck into the snow.
They're like a
It was
tripod.
horrible. It was so bad, and my castle is built like a triceratops, which I thought was cool. Brother instantly started laughing at that, but I refused to take that out. But now you were talking about castles leaning over, and I was thinking, because the horns are the towers, and they kind of fall sideways, and I was like, oh, please don't bring me into this conversation. Please don't bring me into this conversation.
Yeah.
Gravity tends to work differently when things are on their sides.
Yeah. Well, see,
Yes.
before you guys showed up, I was like, Andy, I don't think I'm gonna do well on this podcast, man. I really don't think I'm gonna do well. And so I don't know if you noticed, but I've been quiet, just like don't. I'm like don't teacher, don't point me out, don't ask me about it. But
Yeah, they beat that stuff out of you pretty early on in architecture school because
Do they?
everyone wants to cantilever everything, and that just means it being over nothing, like building over air, and that takes a ton of work to do. I mean, you'll see in Gothic architecture, then that's what they cantilever everything, and everything's swinging and tall, but they have huge ass columns and struts and all sorts of support everywhere. They just made their support look really cool.
and it's still safe. It is safe though.
What?
The cantilever, but the way they did it is actually still safe today.
Oh, in Gothic buildings? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the difference is that they made their structure ornamental, so it looks really nice and is really expensive, and churches were expensive back then. Whereas today, you usually wouldn't want to waste all your money on structure for no reason. They just wanted to build everything really, 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 really tall, and so they needed to structure it like that. But it didn't add anything to the buildings at all. Just looks cool.
That's such a funny thing, that conceit of building tall. Like, there are places that you would need to build tall, like let's say a lighthouse or a watchtower, where we're added height. But humankind throughout the ages have always tried to build tall, as opposed to finding other ways. Like in places like, let's say, Tokyo, it makes sense to build tall because there's nowhere to spread out. In Texas, a tall building is useless because you've got so much space to spread out. Or Canada, So it's interesting how humans have continued to carry on this conceit of let's build straight up.
Did you know?
mean, there's zoning laws. It's just easier to only own one property.
Did you know, as a Texan here, I have to give this information. It's actually paramount, and it's obligatory for me to give this information. There is enough space in Texas for every human being on the planet to live in the state of Texas with the same comfortability as New York City.
Are you serious right now?
That's how freaking big Texas is.
Let's keep them out, Steve. Come on, let's go build a wall around all of Texas.
Do it, man. We are.
And we'll even put our buildings on stilts.
Oh,
Yeah,
stilt
that's
buildings.
smart.
Yeah, so we can
Stilt
actually use our
buildings.
bow and arrows while spitting out our chew.
Hey, they do
long
that
as
up
my
here.
house-
They do that for flooding. I just
As long
wouldn't
as
call
my
them
house
stilts.
looks,
Bows and
as long
arrows.
as my house looks like a triceratops, I'm good.
All right, guys. And with that, we are officially out of time.
Oh, this was so fun.
This really was.
It's actually rare that we go to the full time, so that just means you guys are awesome.
Hey,
No, this was a fun one. I like not religious talk.
Yeah.
I was gonna talk about the Tower of Babel, and then I went, "Don't do it. Don't do it."
Hey,
I thought of that too.
Yeah. Hey, wait, real quick though. The Tower of Babylon was just a story, right? Used to
Babel. Not
Babel. What I say? Babylon. The
Babel.
story. Never
I
mind.
think it's based off the Library of Alexandria.
Is it really?
No, it outdates the Library of Alexandria. I mean, you're talking to me who fully believes that the Bible's literal. So let's not.
Oh, okay.
We'll start the conversation. Let's do it. Another episode. No, I'm kidding.
That's interesting. Awesome. Well, guys, why don't you tell our listeners and viewers where they can find you?
You could.
Texas. I'm here. It might be difficult. It's a pretty big place. But if you find me, there's a prize in it for you.
Yeah, you can find us on athonbooks.com, and then repbruno.com. He's on jamiecastle.com, and
We're on
Facebook everywhere. We just use our real names, so pretty easy.
Awesome. Andy, anything else we need to know?
No, we've got John Kang on, JC Kang coming on next week. If you
Oh,
have
cool.
a
John's
response to my
awesome.
email, yeah,
He's a cool guy. Yeah.
so hopefully we'll talk about martial arts or something cool like that.
Yeah. I think he
because
actually
he's
takes
Asian.
Wing Chun.
That's so
wow.
messed up.
He's a Wing Chun.
I know. I'm kidding.
Come on, Andy.
That was messed up.
I know. I'm sorry. I
Jeez,
had to do
Andy.
it.
Oh, I thought you were talking to Andy for being messed up. I
I
apologize
was.
for my racist friend. He is from Japan, though. So he's a lot
It's okay.
things.
John's a great guy.
Actually, so next week is our 100th episode.
Whoa!
Our
Oh,
100th
nice.
episode. We'll have to do something fancy.
Why weren't we on that one? I'm really offended by
Because
that.
99 is better.
99.
Brooklyn.
Yeah, exactly.
Red, I thought you were gonna say because 9/11 didn't happen or something.
Wow.
I don't know.
No,
I don't know
definitely
why
happened.
that went through my head.
I'm not sure either.
Speaking of architecture. Anyway, wow, this episode got dark. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there before I dig myself a hole and have to really get some stilts. That was a horrible joke.
Terrible.
That was a horrible joke.
Oh,
I am
man.
so
And it-
sorry.
And
All
it was
right,
a great
guys.
joke.
So, yeah, right. So, guys, that is the end of this episode. We really appreciate you guys stopping by. A lot of amazing authors here. We got the #1 Audible bestsellers. We have Andy, who is 5'8" or 6'8", and you have me, who has an awesome. You like how I just
finish it, Stevie. Just
all
end
right.
it. Put us
I
out
love
of
you
our
guys.
misery.
Thank you so much for an amazing podcast. We hope to see you next week for our 100th episode, and we really thank Rhett and Steve for coming on the air with us. It was awesome, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.